What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Wednesday night episode of Mythic Conversations. It's a big one tonight because we are at episode 50. Well, we're kind of at episode 50. I'm calling it episode 50. Realistically, it's not. If you've been with me since the beginning, you probably know that I started this show doing a live broadcast on Facebook, specifically on the Facebook, the Mythic Legion's Cabal. Had some technical issues, so we decided to move it over to YouTube and do it live here. And when we did so, we restarted the numbering, kind of like comic books. When comic books relaunch, they start at a new number. They go right back to issue number 1. We did the same thing here. We went back to episode 1. So technically, our 50th episode was a while ago because we did 13 episodes on Facebook, but who's counting? We're all friends here, right? This is the real episode 50. And to do this right, to celebrate correctly, I brought in one of my all-time favorite people to talk not only Legions with, but just to talk toys and everything else with. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Eric Treadaway. Oh, hold on a minute. You got you muted there. There we go.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So again, really excited for the conversation tonight. I've got a number of things that I want to cover. And then I do want to go to the audience. I know that you probably have some questions as well. Do me a favor. Don't hit me up with all the questions right now. Let me get through some of the stuff that I want to chat with Eric about, that I want you all to hear about. And then as we get towards the end of the night, we'll go through some audience questions, and you can blast up the chat, and we'll look at them then. Cool? So, Eric, I'll tell you what I don't want to do tonight. I don't want to start the way that every interview that I watch with you begins. Every interview, I think, has to treat it kind of like they don't know who you are and they don't know the history of Four Horsemen Studios and of Mythic Legions. So they're always like, tell us how you guys got together. And there's the McFarlane story, then opening the studio and Master Universe Classics. My audience obviously knows Mythic Legions, so we're going to skip right past that. And we're just going to, if you want that information on Eric, literally look at any other interview he's done. He probably covers it. You cool with that, Eric?
I'm great with that.
Don't want to cover all that again. The first thing I want to talk about actually has nothing to do with Mythic Legions in the studio. It's something. The other day I was watching the documentary Action Figure Adventure that Rob McCallum did. And one of the things that Cornboy was mentioning about the approach to Mythic Legions is that you guys approach it like toy fans because you are toy fans. And he says, specifically myself and Eric, we've been collectors for a very long time. I know you still collect today. So I'm curious, today, what are you actually collecting outside of Mythic Legions?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people collect where they focus in on a single line or a very particular type of figure or something like that. And I'm all over the place. I always have been. Even as a kid, I would just jump from toy line to toy line, and essentially it comes down to if there's a figure that I find to be a cool looking figure or something that excites me creatively, then that's the sort of thing I gravitate toward. And of course, there's so many things out there that harken back to childhood, and all the line revivals that are out there. Which of course we're lucky enough to work on a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, just by default, I collect a lot of the stuff that we work on. Like the turtles that we've been doing are a lot of fun. Even if we weren't working on that. But outside of that, we buy a lot of Marvel Legends around here. Again, very, kind of picking just the ones I like. I tend to go for the ones that were in that I grew up with in the Mego and Secret Wars era.
Okay.
I've always it's slowed down a lot, but I've always been big on Masterpiece Transformers. Not so much the newer version where they look like cartoon accurate, but the early versions where they were more toy updates. I've tried to collect G.I. Joe Classified to varying degrees of success.
Yep.
Always a big Glyos fan. That's a constant. I'm looking around here, see what else I've bought recently. My kids get a lot of Fortnite stuff, and some of that is fun. I like the food-based characters.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just something cool about that. Star Wars, some Masters Universe here and there. But I do jump around quite a bit though. Like I said, if it's something that's cool or unusual, that's what I like to get. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff now.
Sure.
But I don't buy as much as I used to either. I mean, there was a time where I was, just buying up everything I could find. But yeah, I don't know. It's without Toys R Us around, and it seems like every time I go to Target, there's nothing on the shelves. Even after I hadn't been there in months, I go in and it still feels like I've seen everything. So yeah. I mean,
it's so different than those days. I can remember toy hunts going to Toys R Us and like KB Toys, and there being multiple action figure aisles. And that I've said this before, that the first line I heavily collected was McFarlane Spawn, which obviously you guys were heavily involved with.
Right.
And going into a toy aisle and seeing a new case of Spawn on the shelves. I still remember the day that I first saw Male Bolgia from Wave 2, Series 2 of Spawn, seeing that monstrous package. I mean, it was almost like falling off the backer card. Seeing that on a shelf, that was amazing. And you don't get that experience anymore. As much as I love shopping online for the convenience, you are losing something about not being able to go into the aisle and see that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that was an exciting time too, aside from the fact that just the action figure game, so to speak, was just elevating so quickly at the time, because McFarlane came in a line that's often overlooked, I find, because I felt it actually happened before McFarlane, was when Playmates put out Skeleton Warriors.
Yeah. Love that line.
It was awesome. And, compared to what you were seeing, there were mixed materials. So you had like the transparent gems, you had the chromed items on it, real hair. Yeah. And then washes, the paint washes. And so that kind of started it. And then of course, by the time that McFarlane hit, it was so pervasive at that point. And then everybody wanted in on that. So you saw Playmates doing Wildcats figures and doing all types of turtle crossovers, and Kenner started doing the Legends of the Dark Knight and things like that. And so it was exciting to see, because there's just a lot of creativity and a lot of experimentation and all that. Whereas the thing that I always go back to with the 80s is the 80s was great because there was so much original content, so much content that started in the toy world, and then it worked its way out into, media. And so that was a lot of what to me was exciting, because you'd walk into a toy store and see something for the first time on the toy shelf, and it was exciting. And then 90s were very license heavy, but the quality and the approach to making it was changing so rapidly. So there was such an excitement, and just a different way of getting that creativity out there.
Yeah. I remember the first line. So Spawn was really what I started collecting, but the first line that I remember really opened my eyes to like the new wave of toys, I guess, not as a kid, as a collector, was the Kenner Aliens line. That first wave that had, like the Scorpion alien and the Bull alien. I remember, oddly enough, getting a tattoo, and the tattoo artist had them there. And I was like, what the hell are these things? Because they were so detailed that it just blew me away. And I was like, I've got to get these. So that's what got me back into the toy aisle. And then Spawn is really what blew me away. But you mentioned Skeleton Warriors. That Oracula figure, the big multiple arms, I remember going into a toy aisle and seeing that thing and just being like, this is so cool. It made me feel like when I was a kid and I went in and first saw Skeletor and had that exact same, I have to own this figure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, as a kid who always wanted a skeleton toy, like that was, I had the Charon figure from Clash of the Titans, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But
totally solid bottom piece. You could just basically stand or sit.
Yes. And so, I always say, like, when I saw Skeletor for the first time, that was the figure I had always been waiting for. And then, a decade and a half later, Skeleton Warriors pop up. And then it's an entire line of skeleton with skeleton horses and skeleton motorcycles and little skeleton dragon pets and all this stuff. And so that was a cool one. And like I said, I feel like it gets overshadowed all the time because it came out, it was the summer of 94, and McFarlane Toys started to hit in the fall of 94. So it had that little window, because I remember I was graduated college in 94, and I already had landed the job at McFarlane before I graduated. And so I graduated, and then I was home for maybe like 2 months before I moved up to New Jersey to work at McFarlane. And when we drove up in my my Saturn at the time, on the dashboard, my wife and I were driving up, and on the dashboard I had the Skeleton Warriors Dr. Cyborn figure and a hard copy of Spawn that they gave me for reference, and they were sitting on the dash the entire ride up. And it's just, so to me, it's also those two Skeleton Warriors in the early days of McFarlane are so intertwined, even to the point where in 94 I came up for Toy Fair, and I was in Todd's like show space the entire time. It wasn't even a showroom at the time. It was like a show cubicle. And I walked over with Todd to the Playmate showroom and walked through with him. And I remember when we got to Skeleton Warriors, they had the play set that they never made. He was all over it. Yeah. And it was just funny because, again, it's just like that Skeleton Warriors was so ahead of its time. Yeah. And then, McFarlane came along and just really got so much more of the attention.
Yeah. I will say that the number one unproduced toy that I've ever seen pictures of that I wish they would have made was that skeleton dragon from Skeleton Warriors. Did you see that at the years that you went to Toy Fair? Was that on display one of those years?
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely.
And it was awesome because it was they had trying to think how to describe it, but the way the display was, it was a big open room, and it was like, imagine it's like a big tiered table, and they had all kinds of turtles on the front of it, and skeleton warriors, and Star Trek or whatever they had at the time, and then right in the middle of it, in a big glass case, that dragon was up there, and it was impressive. It was very impressive.
Yeah,
and I have to say, like, some of those Series 2 figures, I actually would probably want more than the dragon. Like, I just love those. And I mean, this is the sort of thing, like, you see in Mythic where, we've got a red skeleton and a green skeleton and a blue skeleton and stuff. That second series, they had those different colored skeletons, and I love that. And that goes back to Castlevania. Because in Symphony of the Night, they were the green Nova skeletons, and the red skeletons go all the way back to the beginning. And they've done other colors along the way. And I don't know. It's just that geek DNA coursing through everything.
It's wonderful to see those influences make their way into the Mythic Legions line, because like you, I'm a product of the same era. I watched the same cartoons. I played with the same action figures. And to see those subtle influences that make their mark on Mythic Legions, it's still so uniquely its own thing, but you can see the history of what influenced it. And that, for me, as someone from that era, makes me love it that much more.
Well, it's not, there's one thing to rip stuff off.
Yeah, of course.
Which is certainly a problem. But, there's certainly no shame in, having your influences, and there's no reason to hide it, because people share in that joy. And so, if they can, you have a shared experience or a shared passion from when you were a kid or something that you grew up on, it's a way to share that again in a newer incarnation or, newly influenced form.
Sure. And I mean, you look at any form of art, any form of creativity, music, film, or whatever, and, people talk about their influences, and the movie, a filmmaker talks about the movies that influenced them and made them want to make movies. And, they're not ripping off the things that they love. They're using them as creative fuel to inspire them to create something new. And even if you can see those influences, that's part of the creative process. And to me, that's so much of what comes through with your guys' work, is seeing those influences. And, especially hearing you talk about them, and, that you loved these colored skeletons, and that influenced in some way, you wanted to say, well, could we have colored skeletons? And if we do, why would they be colored? And you've written lore for that. Clavey in the red skeleton, not just a red skeleton. He's got this blood magic that makes his bones that color based on his bio. So I love that type of influence stuff. I'm also the kind of person that loves to see how things are made and loves to hear that process. So
sometimes, like, you're doing a good job of drawing it out of me, because some of that stuff, like the character like that, has been so long ago that it was been created. Sometimes I kind of need to kind of rattle that loose a little bit. Well,
that's my job as an interviewer. So before we move on and talk a little Mythic, the last thing I wanted to know about your collecting now. Collecting and displaying go hand in hand, and my display is always my backdrop on the show. How do you actually display? Do you have like a collection room in your house? Is it just around your office? How do you display your stuff?
Currently, in where we're at now, I don't have a tremendous amount of display space, but I have a studio in the house, and that's where most of my stuff is. I mean, our house in general, everybody likes, pop culture and toys and stuff around here. So, like, I've got, in the dining room, I've got McDonald Land memorabilia, and like I mentioned, the Fortnite stuff. I've got the food characters in there, and
appropriate.
Yeah, like that's what it's like. It's an entirely food themed section, but it's mostly like in the studio here. Like, I've got just shells worked into the room. And again, I've got some things like my masterpiece Transformers are, well, even those are mixed with vintage Transformers, but they're all together, and some of the like Masters Universe are together, but then most of what's around here is just random. I've got, I'm looking up on the one shelf. I've got Star Wars, Black Hole, a lot of Glio stuff, Power Lords, some Disney plushes, Care Bears. I was very excited to score a couple of Care Bear action figures a couple of years ago. Dark Crystal. It's just
really is a mix,
random mix, but I like that. To me, I like the organized display, but I also like the hodgepodge just because that's kind of like what's going on in my head. Are there any? I see some. Yes. Asking any Cosmic Legions on display? Not on display, but on this screen over here, there's an in-process piece, and this entire table in front of me is covered with Cosmic Legions 3D prints. So
there we go.
They're very up close and personal.
I've got some questions about Cosmic tonight. So let's move on. Toycon, New Jersey. That was a couple weeks ago now. How blown away were you by the fan reaction at Toycon this year?
It was the entire weekend was amazing. We've been very careful with COVID. I haven't been, like we do a lot of our like grocery shopping. We have it delivered and stuff like that. So, I barely been in like a store in the past year and a half. So just being around people and like under fluorescent lights, like in a big space like that was, such a, kind of an overwhelming experience and good overwhelming. But then to have that building full of familiar and friendly faces and, it's always a fun show, but like being back after a year and a half, to me, like the response was great, but the camaraderie was, it was awesome. Like, it was great. Like, just you were there, Walter was there, Trevor was there, like it was cool. Like, in, all of our, the local crew, just so many Cabal members, just like it was awesome. One of the coolest things was walking in and like seeing so many Cabal shirts and Horsemen shirts, and the first person in line waiting to get into the show had a Horseman shirt on, and like it's surreal. It's surreal. And then to throw on top of that the fact that like everybody was so excited about the product and just the ability to come in and pick things up, that not only the new stuff, but that we brought in some cooler older pieces, and it just it was so overwhelmingly positive, because it's also a year and a half of most interaction is the internet and social media. And so it gets so nasty, and people, are so quick to complain. And, then here it's just everybody's having a good time and happy to be together. And, it just was a great experience. And, Joe runs an amazing show. It's always one of our absolute favorite shows. We consider it our local toy show, our local convention. So, it's always good, but this time was just, phenomenal.
Yeah. The amount of people that came, because obviously the table that I was at most of the time was right before the Horseman table, based on the way the line snaked out the building. So I got the chance to talk and interact with a lot of people. I was the opening act. I got to warm the crowd before they got to you. And the amount of people that came up and genuinely said they love the show, they watch every week, they thank me for, bringing this content to them, was just, touching. It was incredibly cool to have that kind of appreciation. And again, to see everyone so excited to be there, to be a part of that. I told the story on the show a few weeks ago that it was hysterical when I had just finished setting up my table and I was going to go walk the show before the doors open, and I see Jim walking in, and he's got a cart with a handful of boxes. And I'm like, hey, Jim, can I help you? Do you need anything? He said, yeah, bring these to the table and start unloading them. I'm going to go get more. So I bring these like 8 cases to the table and I start unpacking them. And then everyone just keeps pouring in. It's like Jim, Chris, Joe, everyone's just coming in with more and more boxes. And it got to the point, Walter and I are putting this stuff on the table. Cameron's putting this stuff out. And I just keep seeing more and more boxes come in. And all I could think is when they said that this is the most product they've ever had at a show, they really weren't kidding, because it was unbelievable how much stuff was there.
It was. We've never had an experience like that ever. For us, like we've been in the industry for so long, and then, trying to push creator-owned product for a long time now, like it to varying degrees of success. But it's tough at times. Like in many of those years was going out to San Diego. Mm-hmm. And of course you're already a small fish in a big pond when you go out there. But you spend a fortune to go out. You're out there for a week away from your family. You're spending weeks preparing for it. Mm-hmm. It's enough to beat you down. And we on our absolute best year out there, we never even came close to an experience like this. Yeah. And it just, this is the sort of things, like booth experience, or seeing what was going on. This is the sort of thing where we would be standing at our booth watching what's going on at Hasbro and just like, oh man, like what it would be like to have that type of activity at the booth. Yeah. And we're certainly not Hasbro, but it felt good to have that type of the excitement really was palpable. It's just everybody was energized. Yeah. And it was cool.
Well, it's been a very grassroots type line, going to Kickstarter to get the line going and going right to the fans and saying like, hey, this is what we want to do. Do you like it? Do you want to back this? Do you want to be a part of this? And seeing that incredible support for the first Mythic Legions line, and then obviously into Advent of Decay and the increased support, seeing the community just continue to grow year over year. I say all the time that I can't believe how young the line still is and how much upside there still is for the community to grow, because when you see how passionate it is, when you see that kind of fan reaction, it feels like this must have been around for so long for people to have formed this type of attachment. But it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible to see that kind of reaction. And I've been telling everyone, as incredible as Toycon was last month, the buzz already for November for Legions Con and Mythic Weekend it's deafening already. It's incredible. You mentioned San Diego and how you used to go out there. You guys deciding not to do San Diego anymore was actually the start of G-Con. Why you guys decided to do your own local show, virtual show a number of years ago, and now that's morphed into this Mythic Weekend. That I mean, people are already booking hotels. I've already seen hotel prices in the Wayne, New Jersey area go up by about 25% in the last 2 weeks since we announced the date.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty crazy. There's going to be a couple hotels that I think are just going to be packed with Mythic Legions fans that are flying in to be a part of this.
That's amazing.
Oh, I mean,
it is going to be the weekend's going to be out of control. I mean,
we're having traffic flow conversations. Like literally, Joe and I are looking at the layout and we're like, where do we put the lines so we can get people in the door as quickly as possible and have them around the exhibits and have the lines here. The fact that it's at that point that we have to think about crowd control, come on, that's incredible.
It's just, I mean, you think back, it hasn't been that long since the first one, and to go from that little room on the first one in some hallway space, which I mean was very successful.
Yeah.
But it's a big jump in 2 years, especially considering we didn't have a live event last year.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a lot of what we're doing this year was things we had talked about in theory to do for 2020. You know, we had said these are the things we want to do, but we never really got into the actual planning phases because COVID hit. So this year, I mean, that's why it's so exciting. We learned a lot of stuff last year, doing a virtual piece of it last year. You know, that reinforced the fact that we're going to have still a virtual component to try to broadcast at least some of it. But yeah, I can't believe that for a show as far out as it is, there's already this much excitement for it. But that's actually, do you need a minute?
Sorry, I'm texting here because my internet is getting a little choppy.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if it's because kids are using the bandwidth.
Same thing
so
here.
I would not normally be texting.
No. I've done the same thing. My kids are upstairs too. On Wednesday nights, they all watch a show together so we can limit the amount of devices that are pulling bandwidth.
That's a good idea. Good strategy.
So thinking about... Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you're right though. Like I remember Joe Vettery coming into the office early last year. It must have been like February, and we were talking about some of the plans for Legions Con for last year, and I remember just having those conversations and the ideas floating around, and you could feel the momentum like starting to pick up. And and then the rug was pulled out from under us.
Yeah, but yeah, we're gonna make up for it this year for sure. So that's actually an interesting segue. I'd like to go back talking about the most recent show. Let's talk a little bit. I'm curious about that first show, Toypocalypse. So when you debuted Mythic Legions at your own show, Toypocalypse, a number of years ago, this was a point where they were intended to be, 1/18 scale. So like, 3 3/4, 4-inch type scale figures. They were going to still be, modular with the Glio system. The ones that were on display were 2-up, so they were about 8 inches. But correct me if I'm wrong. At that point, the characters that you showed were not meant to be named characters. They were just possible design configurations that people might be able to select. There was going to be a voting process, kind of like Fantastic Exclusive. But people liked those designs so much that they became Gorgo Aetherblade and Gideon Heavensbrand and so forth. I'm curious about that transition. We've heard you talk before about the move from that scale to where you are now, the 1/12 scale. But how did the lore of Mythic Legions, going from those design ideas, those possible configurations, to named characters in the lore of Mythos, how did that all come about?
Gotta think back a little bit. It seems like it's always been there. You know, a lot of the change happened. I don't even remember if we came to the realization that we needed to move into name characters before or after the decision to go 6-inch. It was somewhere in the same vicinity, but that decision might have even started to play out before we switched scales. Mm-hmm. But if you look at all those figures, aside from the fact that the figures in that first display were nameless, they were also faceless. Mm-hmm. The skeletons, but as far as, you know, the living creatures, mm-hmm. they were faceless, and that, you know, that played it. That was for many reasons, but one was just a cost standpoint. One was, you know, painting faces at a tiny scale. But largely it was so that it was this idea that, you know, these characters act as your avatar into mm-hmm. the world of Mythic Legions, or you know, however you're going to use these figures, or, you know, the world you were going to create. Mm-hmm. And just kind of, it dawned on us at one point that something was missing. Like, they were cool, but you know, like, in all the figures that we've done over the years, like, we'd love to get into the expressiveness of the faces and the details, and you know, how could, like, you know, you've got a fantasy line, and if at that rate we would have orcs with completely covered faces,
yeah.
That's, you know, you're stealing the fun from the line out of the gate. And so I remember that was really the starting point for all of that. And then, so some of the first ones, I think, like I remember Urzok was one of the early figures with a full face. Atlas definitely was. That was one that came very early. Like, that was I think with Atlas, that was the bare body, like the muscle body, mm-hmm. and Atlas were sculpted simultaneously, and then Urzok's head kind of came into the mm-hmm. even though it didn't go on that body, but it kind of came into the mix in the same era. Okay. And then that's where we started to see these. And it also, like with Atlas, you started to add an asymmetry into the line, because everything was very symmetrical. And just, you know, it started to add more character. And then with that, then the lore just, a lot of times the best character creation comes to me when I'm just sculpting the character. And it's hours of sculpting, and you just start, your mind just wanders, and you know why does Atlas, you know, why does he have the scar? What, you know, why, you know, there's a reason why, like, Otho is a knighted, you know, character, but he has this mane of wild hair and this, you know, grizzly beard, and so, you know, and then so it goes back and forth where the decisions for the way the characters look are happening at the same time that the character story is kind of, you know, but that's percolating as well, and so. With Mythic, it's so opposite to the way that we've developed lore and story, because if we go back to Seventh Kingdom, like, you know, we had this huge Bible, like, from the beginning. Magma Core, same thing, like, just, you know, full bios on every character, like, all this backstory. You know, it was like, from concept there was story in place. Here we're backwards. You know, we've created a line that purposely had no story, and so it came together. It came together in, like, in many ways, character by character. And then the threads started to become clear. And then it started to, then it just started to pick up steam and just started rolling. And then because like characters like Alithia and Poxus and the names and the factions and all that stuff have been there before we ever launched the first Kickstarter. And like those characters like Artemis and Hera and Poxus, Alithia, Necronominus, and Arethyr, like they've been designed since day one, practically. Once we started doing lore, like well before the first Kickstarter. So it's just interesting. I remember we were trying to, always trying to like get some sort of placement with a show or something like that, and I think we were trying to do it with one of the other properties. No, actually, we weren't. I don't know. I don't remember what we were doing, but we were trying. I think we were just starting with Mythic Legions, and we were trying to find. I think it was an agent to like help us move it forward. I can remember they came in and just very specifically saying, pitching. Well, the great thing about this is we don't have a story yet, so if we go to a network or what, it was probably a network and not a streamer back then. But and pitch this, a writer can come in and bring something to the story. It's not so locked into place that there's no room for creativity. So I mean, this is a very long, winding answer to your question, but
fine.
I mean it's fitting because that is kind of the way it came together. It was Cosmic, right? It like is back to the opposite of that again. Like we spent a lot of time putting together a pitch deck for Mythic and putting it together in a presentable format and all that. And so now Cosmic is benefiting from that, and so it's much more organized, and the web of characters and factions and story are very woven in from the start with this one.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, and I have some Cosmic questions coming up. One thing that's interesting too is when I started working with you guys, you guys gave me just a dump of content to say like, hey, here's product photos, here's this, here's that. And you gave me the pitch deck, the original pitch deck that you had put together, or at least a version of it for Mythic Legions. And one of my favorite things about that pitch deck is you had like a timeline of when everything was going to happen. We're going to release this wave, and we're going to do this, we're going to do, and you can see how the success of the line in those early days totally blew up your plans. Like if you would have done that, you inserted a number of waves in there to meet fan demand. Like there were fans that wanted more, they wanted new characters, they wanted new figures. And almost everything on that list, you've done these things. I mean, horses was on that list. It just took longer to get there because you had to put so much in between and start fleshing out that story. And it's incredible. To me, it's incredible that you say the story wasn't there from the beginning in the format, because I did a show on Mythic Conversations a number of episodes ago where I talked about the lore and I tried to weave some things together. And it's a really rich story. When you look at all of these factions and all the little intrigues that are going on, especially in the Legion of Arethyr, a lot of devious characters in that faction that are this one going after this one. But it is a really, really rich story. So for you to say that it didn't start that way, but Cosmic is, I know fans are going to love, what you're blending, the web you're already weaving for that Cosmic line.
Well, I think that's part of our approach in general, even when it comes to just the aesthetics, business, whatever. There's like a certain amount of planning, but there's a level of flexibility that's always in place. And sometimes, as the aforementioned business part of it, maybe that's not always such a good thing. But creatively, we've found that works well. Like, it's good to have a plan, good to have a structure, but sometimes you have to zig. And even like that's what, like with sculpting, I like a lot of times with the clay, and I still do it with the digital. Like I like to let the material guide the sculpture a lot of times. Like, you find things that you wouldn't, you don't need to control everything. And sometimes just letting things flow, you get it's more immediate, and it's there's more life to things, and that happens with the story too. That's how, I say with a complete clarity that the red shield did not exist when we started planning out Mythic Legions.
Sure.
But it's, when we're developing a line and it starts to become clear that there's this cool opportunity for a sub faction, that goes not only a current sub faction, but then that dates back to an earlier time in the history of Mythos and in the history of the army of Laodiceus. It's just cool to be able to add that in and just, I don't know, it's just, it adds a new bit of excitement and just freshness that if you tried to plan everything out from the beginning, you'd be stuck. And I think even from like a sculpting standpoint or a designing standpoint, sometimes there's just an inspiration. I don't know if it's Halloween and you see a cool vampire movie or something like that. You might say, oh, great, I just want to sculpt a vampire, or whatever. And so just react and sit down and have fun with it. And, you get something unexpected with it. And that's a lot of the fun from our end. And I think brings a lot of the excitement to the line.
And I agree with your comment about needing to be flexible. I mean, if you set a plan in place and you don't allow any data to change that plan, that's just silly in any kind of business. You guys have always done a wonderful job of listening to fan feedback, of looking at what's popular, and taking that into consideration with the decisions you make. I mean, a figure like the Elf Ranger, which is one of my favorite figures from the Advent of Decay wave. He wasn't planned for Advent of Decay, right? That was something that you figured eventually you would get to him, but so many people requested him during Advent of Decay that you guys, you said you zigged and you said, okay, we've got the parts, let's put this together. We'll sculpt the headpiece that we need here. And we got an Elf Ranger in that line. That is a testament to listening to fan feedback and being willing to change course when it makes sense.
The Kickstarter is the perfect little microcosm of when and where to plan your approach and when to react. Because a Kickstarter, you could plan it for months and months and months. And the minute it goes live, you realize I could have done that, and that. Yeah. And then, over the course of the Kickstarter, once the backers and the fans start giving you input, and it's generally with that comment section, it's a more intense level of input and the speed that you're getting it and everything. But it gives great opportunities to make a reaction like that, or both of the Kickstarters, really, they both hit a point where it started to speed up so quickly, and we needed to add things to the line. And so you go back to the first one. I mean, there might not have been a barbarian builder without the late, because I mean, really, that first Kickstarter was slow for the first half.
Yep.
Painfully slow.
People are surprised to hear that, but I remember you guys changing around tooling patterns so you could get Urzok included because people were concerned that there was no orc available in the initial offering. So you got Urzok included, you got Bog Goblin included, and I believe you added Malleus at the same time. And then adding those three kind of sparked a bunch of additional pledges because I was a backer then, and I remember that being the spark that really kind of lit it. And then from that point, you started to see that gradual uptick. And as soon as it funded and stuff in stretch goals started opening, then it was a mad dash. Then it was just stretch goal, stretch goal, stretch goal, stretch goal.
Yeah, it was. And I remember it was part of that campaign took place during Toy Fair, and we had a booth there, so we were going into Toy Fair, and that was when it was moving really slow. Like, I mean, it was maybe gaining some days like $500 a day, and I would come home at night. I was so stressed out, and it was bad that it was that it was moving so slow anyway. But then there was just this added quality of that. I was sitting in New York City in a suit at Toy Fair all day, and there was nothing we could do. We couldn't we couldn't put together paint masters or any of that kind of stuff. And then it was still moving slow, and then we went out and did Long Beach Comic Con a little bit later, and that's where it funded while we were out there, and it was picking up speed while the entire time we were out there, and we could feel the shift.
Yeah.
But then it got to the point while we were out there, we needed to start making some new stuff and making some things happen, and we were powerless because we were across the country. So it was an interesting campaign, though. Like it definitely had some ups and downs, and of course, ultimately ended fantastically.
Yeah.
But
and then Advent,
yes,
and then Advent was the exact opposite. I remember when Advent of Decay, my family was going to spend the weekend in New Hampshire for that weekend, so I was driving up to New Hampshire on a Friday night when the Kickstarter opened, and I remember we had to stop at a little rest stop, and I was like frantically trying to get Wi-Fi on my phone so I could see what the new offerings in the Kickstarter were. And I couldn't get Wi-Fi, but I got to the hotel. It was like 10 o'clock. And the first thing I did was open up the Kickstarter to see all of the new characters. And, within 24 hours, it was funded. There was none of that. Okay, what do we have to do? Is this going to fund? It was just, by the time that I left New Hampshire for that weekend, you guys had already opened up like probably 10 stretch goals or something. It was a crazy, crazy couple days.
It was wild. Because it was us trying to keep up for a month, and it was the push and pull of hurry up, get us something else. What are you guys doing? Sitting, doing nothing. Versus, please stop adding stretch goals. I can't afford it anymore. You're killing me. And trying to respect both.
Yeah.
So it was a balancing act. Because we couldn't just come to a dead stop and say, hey, you know what, we're done. We're out. Enjoy the rest of the campaign. But yeah, it was so different than the first one. And again, great, but so different.
Incredible. It's interesting because sometimes I don't think people realize. You talk about the work you had to do to prepare for Comic-Con and prepare for the Kickstarter and during the Kickstarter. I think sometimes people fail to realize the work that goes in behind the scenes and the amount of time it takes to go from concept and idea to actual finished product in people's hands. And I know for me, the concrete evidence of that was 3 years ago when I went to intern for a day. That was my first time at the studio. Advent of Decay hadn't shipped yet. That was my reward I chose from Advent of Decay. And I went there, and you had the Advent of Decay prototypes there, the test shots that were there. So we got to see them for the first time. But there were also a lot of other prototype pieces that were on display that we got to see, that we were sworn to secrecy. Now, some of them we've now seen. The Vampire Brute, or Disabolus, from the Alithia wave. He was there at that thing. The head for Thump, the head for Thwick. There were a number of things 3 years ago that we saw that still haven't seen the light of day yet. And it makes me wonder, ballpark number, how many characters, because a lot of people, we're going to talk about Cosmic in a minute, a lot of people have incorrectly been worried that Cosmic is going to cause a slowdown in Mythic. And you guys have said, nope, we're going to run them together. Mythic's not going anywhere. Approximately how many figures in some state of development for Mythic do you have right now?
Oh, I'm that's hard to say. I mean, because there's sometimes I'll open up a folder on my computer and I'll find something that I forgot was even in there. There's stuff that's in file. I mean, there are things that I've sculpted probably in that like 3 years ago range that will, like, I've never even printed out, that will show up in the fall Mythic wave. There might be like 2 waves worth of heads tooled. There is a head from Advent of Decay that has still not been released.
I'm aware of that.
And part of the problem is, like, when I'm sculpting heads for the Deluxe Legion Builder wave, like, I decided, I'm going to sculpt a goblin head. Once I get started, I can't stop. So, because there's just so many possibilities. So there was more than one goblin head sculpted at the time that happened. And that happens all the time. Like, there may be something where I'm working on like a helmet with like a head that has a helmet with a visor. And then at the same time I do that, I go ahead and do a second visor and we throw it in the tooling for later. Yep. And so, which, covers up the entire face. It essentially amounts to a second head.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of pieces out there. I mean, for example, the Deluxe Legion Builder wave, those heads were all done last February or March. Like, those have been around for a while. Like, that was actually the wave that we were, I think, going to release last, like, April, maybe. Like, that was what was that, man, I'm tripping over myself. That is what was going to be released, that got pushed back because of COVID.
Because of COVID, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is hard to say, though, because there's some projects, I might even start and spend like 2 sessions on just to rough something out, and that's floating around. So there are a lot of things in progress.
It's funny you mentioned the head that was tooled during Advent of Decay that still hasn't seen release, because I genuinely thought that was going to be one of these Deluxe Legion Builder heads. I'm like, oh, that head will appear. And then when I saw that it was all totally new heads and it wasn't one that I've seen tooled already at the studio, I was just like, it makes me realize how much you guys have coming, and how the process, the worries that Mythic is going to slow down are unfounded. But with that,
it's like doing the multi, even back, before all the Mythic and stuff, like I was doing, like we were doing DC super. I don't even remember what the name of the line was. I think at the time it was DC Universe Classics. Superheroes before. So we were doing DC Classics and we were doing Masters Classics at the same time. And it'd be this, I'd have the same type of deal going where, I would have maybe like 6 figures going at a time. And it's not that I would work on all 6 on a single day, but it's like I enjoy jumping around from project to project because I like sitting in front of the same thing for 8-10 hours a day or whatever can get tedious. So like it's cool, like right now, like going back and forth between Mythic and Cosmic is really cool because the Cosmic I may be doing something that's super clean, like a tech armor piece, and then I can jump to a monster and Mythic that's got craggy skin and fur and leather detail and things like that. So be able to kind of change channels on that. It just keeps my my mind stimulated and keeps it interesting. So yeah, to answer your question though, yeah, there's a lot out there.
It's a lot.
I mean, and to Cosmic's been being worked on for a long time, so it's been a slow build. So everything that you've seen in Mythic for like the past 2-3 years has happened while Cosmic was being worked on. So,
we saw, and I know it has changed dramatically since then, but the first Cosmic prototype was one of the things we saw at Intern for a Day 3 years ago. And again, I know that character, that idea has moved a lot, and that's a great segue in to Cosmic Legions and to talk a little bit about that. You've already talked about the fact that it's very story driven, that, right. And you and I have spoken about this, that, right from the get-go, you've got a definitive story that you want to tell through these figures. I get a lot of questions on the show. One question or comment that I see a lot of people asking or, suggesting is a lot of people think that Cosmic Legions is going to be what debuts at Mythic Weekend this coming year. So do we have any thoughts on that? Or is that what we're expecting?
More than likely you'll see it before then.
Okay.
At this point, I'm not going to commit to it completely because, anything could change, but that is the plan, is that will have, you'll see Cosmic before Mythic Weekend, and Mythic Weekend will be something Mythic, possibly more Cosmic by that point too. But that's the plan. Cosmic has had a release date probably 10 times over the past few years.
It's moved this year alone a little bit.
Yeah, it may even move again within the month that we're planning on releasing it. The way things are going, we'll see.
So one of the things that I'm really excited about with Cosmic is, obviously you've got the fantasy genre with Mythic. And even though, and this is just my opinion, but even though there's a lot of variety in the fantasy genre, it feels like a lot of fantasy follows a certain set of rules. There's certain set of rules, whether it's kind of the things we've learned from Lord of the Rings, and it kind of trickled down, through Dungeons and Dragons and everything. It feels like a lot of fantasy have things in common. Science fiction does not feel like that to me. Science fiction, I find that there are lots of science fiction that are just totally out there and totally different. And to me, some of the reason is just some of that like old vintage science fiction, because science fiction is always very future speculative. So I love looking at, even things like the Jetsons. Like you look at the Jetsons and you see some of the tech that they're imagining, and some of it's like, oh, we kind of have that now, or wow, that's still totally ways away. some of those old sci-fi movies that imagine what the year 2000 is going to be like and stuff. That gets me really excited for Cosmic because I honestly don't know what to expect. Can you talk a little bit about some of the influences? We talked about some of the influences in Mythic. What are some of the science fiction influences that you're kind of putting in that stew for Cosmic Legions that excite you and influence you as you're creating?
Well, I think, exactly what you mentioned is an integral part about the structure of the Cosmic. Fantasy, there's a good chance you're going to have knights, you're going to have orcs. Like you said, there's kind of a familiar recipe there. Whereas sci-fi, it is much more scattered. In some respects, the fact that something is alien, the stranger it gets, the more alien it becomes. But I'm very interested in if you look at sci-fi, and again, this is another spot where I feel like it's different than fantasy. You can look at 50s sci-fi and 60s sci-fi. Certainly 70s sci-fi has a very particular flavor. 80s, no question about it. All the way up until now. The types of armors and tech that you see and things like that. And of course, even within those decades, it's all over the place. And so I don't want there to be any limitations. That's even back when I remember when that was a talk that we would have at the studio a lot back when we were designing a line like Symbiotech. We want, and again, this goes even further back to Masters of the Universe. I've talked about this probably many times. So this might be repetitive, but Masters of the Universe, I loved in the first wave that you had a human guy, a human woman, a tech human guy. Then you had the bird guy, the fish guy, the skeleton guy, the beast guy, the space guy, all in one line. And so it already established this idea that there were no limitations to the types of characters that you could fit in. They all had a style that pulled them together, but it was a world where anything was possible. And that's the Cosmic really speaks to that, because it's not like it can only be hard sci-fi, or it's only relegated to retro sci-fi, or like cyberpunk or whatever. Like it's open to anything. There's been a joke about going around about doing a space moose. I want a world where you could commit to a space moose and it doesn't look out of place.
I agree with you. I like that world as well. I fully support space moose.
And so but I mean, as far as direct influences, of course, the Star Wars is the one you can't escape. So in many ways, it's how do you make it not Star Wars? But I love Battlestar Galactic from the 70s. The chrome on the Cylons, those shots where they're sparkling. The 60s, that the retro blaster aliens and things like that they're more comical but still cool. I'm massively a child of the 80s, so there's the two kind of major elements to 80s sci-fi, one being the neon super sleek Tron, that when you look up 80s graphic design, it's always that black and purple star field with the grid, and then like the neon triangle like floating over the top of it, and that's Tron. That's so Tron. Yeah. But then at the same time, there was also, I just remember seeing so much of this when I was a kid. There was like this wasteland sci-fi that was so big in the 80s, like, ranging from like Mad Max to B movies to I always use this reference, but there was a Rick Springfield video. This video like this song called Bop Till You Drop. And I remember searching this thing up lately because I remembered the video when I was a kid. They had these cool aliens in the video, and I would draw them in my sketchbook. But it was, I think, in the 80s, that like kind of wasteland sci-fi aesthetic, and it was kind of there's a lot of like cyborg in that too. Yeah. And I think it was all very affordable to do at the time. You put people out in the desert and throw rags on them, and they drove like old rusted like dune buggies around, and you've got yourself a sci-fi movie. Or even like that old that Tom Petty video where they they go into the tent with all the arcade in it and stuff like that. But I mean, there's just so much to pull from, and that's much like we said, like the skeletons go, you see they go all the way back to Castlevania, and they come across skeleton warriors. There'll be a lot of those things, because trying to create something now, like, to a degree, everything's been done before.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you take those influences and throw them into a pot, remix them in a way where it becomes something that you haven't seen. The influences are there, but how do you make it your own and make it something something that's worth telling, a story worth telling, or a group of characters that's worth sharing. And so, I think you'll see that, and it's even something as well, like, with Mythic, I felt like early on we had to play it safe to a degree. You had to get characters out there that people had a familiarity with, that they felt comfortable with. And then, I think if we did a fantasy line and we released Alithia in the first wave, I don't think people would have known what to make of that necessarily. Yeah. Like if you're doing knights and a skeleton, and then you throw Alithia in, and so you got to start building the world, and then getting branching out into the more original pieces and the things that might get a little weirder. And I think Cosmic's going to be the same way. I think hopefully it's going to feel fresh and unique when it comes out, but being a fan of Wayne Barlow, I mean, that's one I've talked about so many times. Yeah. Power Lords, Wayne Barlow. It's one that is tough to escape, because that was the stuff that when I saw those were aliens that looked alien.
Yeah.
But it's also the sort of, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and you've said that in conversations with me, that one of the things you're excited for. I'm gonna mute you for a second, because I think my mic's coming through yours. So I'll mute you for a second while I'm talking. One of the things I remember you saying is that one of the things you're excited for with Cosmic is being able to explore different body shapes. That in Mythic, there are certain body shapes, even though we've got goblins and dwarves and knights and orcs and, ogres and trolls, that truly alien type characters allow you to explore some things that might not work in a fantasy line, that are just going to add some things to this new Cosmic line that we've just never seen out of Four Horsemen Studios.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes to that idea that, it's alien, so the stranger it gets, the more alien it becomes. It's more out of the norm than what we're used to seeing. And you can get away with it, in a way that you can't, if you give an orc a really long neck, or arms that are so long the knuckles are dragging around, it might look cool, but it's not going to necessarily fit, the orc blueprint, so to speak. And just even in the combinations, like where, this cybernetic element, it means, I mean, we could do it, but in Mythic, but you don't necessarily Mythic have it where armor is grafting into skin. Like I said, you could. I mean, I've seen it done where like orcs have metal bolted to their heads and stuff, and it's cool. But there's a different type of part sharing, if you're getting, from a practical standpoint, that goes on where, if, say, at some point we've got a full robot body and then we've got like a full human body, then you could do from, mid forearm down, you could use your robot piece and then make a transition piece that turns that into a half and a half arm. It's just like, there's just a lot of opportunity for creativity. I mean, and of course that's on our end. Like once customizers get a hold of this stuff, I can't even imagine what's going to happen, because within Mythic, I see things that I just can't believe that are happening. And then, where anything goes, I'm sure we're going to see some beautiful and bizarre creations, coming out of the customizer community.
Yeah, I mean, I've long said that the advent of Decay Wave was the biggest infusion of new parts we've seen outside. I mean, obviously you have 1.0, which gave us the figures to begin with. Then we've got Advent, which was such a big addition to the parts library. Now with Aether and Alithia, we're starting to see a lot of new parts. And I mean, the amount of customs that people are doing with the parts from the Aether wave are incredible. I mean, something just like the bare hands, putting those on existing figures adds such a different feel to that character. I really do think that once we get Cosmic and customizers get a hold of those pieces and can really let their imagination span those two different universes, I agree with you completely. We're going to see some wild, wild creations. I mean, that's really going to be a great time for creativity. No
doubt about it. I mean, it's it's exciting to even just think about that. I mean, of course, it's exciting to think about the fact like where Cosmic will actually be in people's hands alone. But then seeing where people where they go with it. It's just there's so much. I mean, even we've done a lot with color in Mythic, but there's there's just a completely different just like the types of characters that we can do in Cosmic, and the type of color combinations, and I've talked about it before, like with the new combinations of materials that we wouldn't necessarily use. Like I think the entire package is going to be one that is familiar in as far as the feel of the figures. And if you pick up a Cosmic figure, it's going to feel like a Legion's figure, but the overall package is gonna have its own identity. It's not gonna rely on Mythic in any way.
Yep. And that's a key point that I'm excited for here. Is we've talked about all the variety, all the influences that you can bring in to this line, whether it's that scorched earth, Mad Max type feel, whether it's the retro type aliens, all these things can go in. But once again, when you look at a Mythic Legions figure, it looks like a product from Four Horsemen Studios. And that's really what I'm excited for, to see all those influences put through the Four Horsemen blender to come out with something that is a product of your studio. That, I think, is going to be really impressive. And you actually mentioned that you have a bunch of things in front of you. Is there anything you'd like to give people a sneak look at?
Yeah, I'll pull this one up.
I'm totally putting him on the spot right now.
So this is just kind of it's not necessarily a second. Yeah. Get this. It's not necessarily a figure reveal, but and this, I mean, this neither one of these is final. This is me just roughing out forms to make sure that they're scaled properly and that they interact with the hands correctly and all that kind of stuff. But just speaking about what customizers can do with mixing parts and all that, even just seeing a mythic vampire wielding a pistol, it could just kind of gives you a little taste of what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's just the weapons alone. That's another avenue that we're going down where it's completely different than Mythic. I mean, there's we've purposely in Mythic not done like Mythic doesn't have like the tinkerer type dwarves and things like that. It's just not we love seeing it when people customize it and it's cool and everything, but it's just it's like a rule that we decided to set early on. But so now, so we haven't done rifles and pistols and, any sort of firearm weapon. So now getting into things like that, it's cool because it's just, we've made plenty of guns for other characters over the years, but, now we get to figure out what that means in Cosmic. And, where we go with that too, because again, if you think back to our 1.0 weapons and our 1.0 weapon pack, it was, the pretty, I was going to say bland. I don't think that's the good PR word to use, but they're very basic, I guess. They're very standard. And then, of course, as we've moved on, the level of detail has increased and the level of variety. And, there are weapons that now are specific to elves and specific to, not more, your evil orc and goblin type looking weapons. And, and even like, ones that look specifically like for knights or whatever. And so, trying to figure out the mix of weapons here. It's a combination of let's get ones that look good for this specific group of characters, but also that have some longevity where, we've got a standard issue rifle and a standard issue pistol, things like that. But then thinking forward though, then, I like these races of characters that we're introducing, it's going to be cool to see what, this race, like what their firearm looks like, or what a melee weapon looks like for this race, or what why does their weapon has to look a certain way because of their strange anatomy. They got like 3 weird fingers, so they don't hold a gun like a human hand. That, like I said, that's probably more for in the future.
People are going to pick apart every little piece that you're giving. Oh, we're going to get 3-fingered hands, and we're going to get this. Awesome. So let's turn it over. We got a few minutes. Let's turn it over and go with some questions. And I usually hate asking questions like this, but someone asked this a lot earlier. I usually hate asking questions of like, will we ever see, or when will we see? but it was an interesting question. Cornboy a while back mentioned that the Fury clan is not exclusive to orcs, that Fury clan can be other races. Someone asked, I don't know if he asked if we will or when we will, but either one, are there expectations that we will see more entries from the Fury clan?
It's open. It is definitely open. I mean, not on, not in the next wave. I'll put it that way. It's a problem that it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem that we keep hitting because there's all these wonderful suggestions and even just ideas that we've had that we just haven't, there's just not enough slots in the line to act on it. I mean, just like, off the top of my head, like, we've still never done a female shadow elf yet. It's something that needs to happen, that it's an easy figure. I mean, we have it's just a repaint at this point. But like, looking at the Alithia wave, there were very specific goals that we had in mind with that, as far as like certain requests for parts that we'd be getting over the years. We really want to do a leather hand set, and do this, the fabric style pants and arms and all the leather goods and all this stuff. And so, and it also had to fit the story, kind of the theme of the wave. And so it just feels like there's not enough. There's so many good ideas just out there, and it's just, it's just not enough slots in the line or times there, enough days in the week, whatever. So it's, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's open. Could be like in a head pack or something like that, even down the road.
So, question here from Anthony Houseel: are there any plans to have names for the bodies of water in Mythos? So I assume that he's referring to the map of Mythos that you and Nate worked on. The land masses all have names, but apparently the water does not.
There's a good chance of that. Like, one of the things that is interesting, again, going back to the way the lore grows with the line. We made that map at a certain point, and there's been several areas established since then. So that map is a living map. And then when you see what the video game guys are doing, like, it's getting to the point where it's going to look like a real map, because you're going to have to zoom in, and it's just more and more text on it. At some point we'll have to go in and do, an overhaul version of the map, and it's something we can look at addressing.
Okay. And again, I don't like, for people asking questions, will we ever see this? When will we see this? If you've ever seen an interview with these guys, they're not going to tell you that. Everything, like Eric just said, is possible. This is one
just to jump in. It's not necessarily because we're being coy either. It's, at this point, I'm starting to know what the fall wave for Mythic looks like. And we, like I just said, we have all these heads that are ready to go, but I don't know for sure what the wave after that's going to be. I have a good idea of what the fall wave for the next year is going to look like, but again, it's it's that like not having everything set in stone and reacting.
Well, this is a good question. I've heard a bunch of people ask. Did you guys give any consideration to adding holes of some kind in the torsos for the horses to accommodate wings down the road? A lot of people have been asking down the road for a Pegasus.
Right. That was something I went back and forth on pretty heavily in development on the figure. At one point, I was considering like making it so that there is an armor piece or a saddle that you attach the figure and plug wings into that. That's still a possibility, or it might just make sense to tool up a new torso. so that it can. The issue that you have with that is we're going to have to make larger wings if it's really going to look right on a Pegasus, which is going to get heavy. And so we need to make sure that whatever the port that plugs into provides enough stability to, so that you can pose the wings. They don't flop down or swing down.
Yep. Okay. So this question, someone asking, being new and knowing that some of the builders are not Legion builders, would we see them released again, or would you just work and reference those and just create new deluxe? I think what they're asking is the builder characters, or I should say the unnamed characters like Fury Clan Orc, like Shadow Elf Warrior. They're not meant to be individual unique characters. They're meant to be generic characters that you can build on armies. I think they're asking if those would ever possibly be released again. And those are often available as possibilities in the All-Star votes.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's certainly on the table as an All-Stars release.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing too, where, depending on how this again, I kind of say, I don't know that evergreen is the best term to use when we're talking about, but we've been calling them the evergreen Legion builders. But it's, I don't know what the best term is for it, but whatever the case, it's going to be the in stock Legion builders or whatever. Like if that goes well, that's also a possibility where it's not just re-releasing Legion builders that we've done before. It might be where it's a character like a Fury Clan Orc. We do a Fury Clan Orc Legion builder, or a Shadow Elf Legion builder. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. It seems like there was another one like that was like the 2.0 male soldier is that's like a $35 figure. Like, you might be somewhere we do a version of that in the future where it's no pain on the body, and that's a builder. I mean, so if the builder program goes well enough, we might even look at adding builders. And I mean, this is off the top of my head, so don't take it as plans that we have. But things like that are always, that's where we listen to requests and good ideas and implement them.
So a number of people have been asking, they're saying, and Curtis has got one right here where it says, I know this is a Mythic Legion show, but can you talk briefly about your work on Silverhawks? I know that Super 7 showed those figures today. Funny little side note, the picture that I posted from Toycon a few weeks ago when we were hanging out in the studio after Saturday, all the stuff that we had to move off the table before we took that picture, there was a bunch of that stuff there that had to get pushed aside. But Super 7 has finally released that. I imagine you must be excited that those pieces are finally out there in the public eye.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what, I got to be careful with what I talk about here.
Of course, yeah. They showed pictures of the first wave. So I honestly, weirdly enough, Steelhawks growing up was not a property I was a big fan of. That was just one that I never really gravitated towards. But they showed Monstar, Buzzsaw, the main character, I guess, Steelheart, and a female Hawk character.
Quicksilver and Steelwill. Steelheart.
Okay, Quicksilver and Steelheart. So those four were actually shown by Super 7.
Yeah, I was excited to get into those. I mean, people, ever since Thundercats started, immediately people wanted to see Silverhawks.
Yep.
I never had any Silverhawks when I was younger. I think, if I remember correctly, like the toys came out like right around the time I stopped buying toys for a few years. But I remember I always thought they were really cool, and kind of, even though I was not buying toys, wanted to buy them. And then I missed an opportunity. Like, once I got back into buying toys, they were on clearance at a store once, and then I miss them, and so I've always kind of wanted them. I like the cartoon, I did watch that. So, but it's cool now. I never got the vintage figures, but the ones that I like, I'm just sculpting, and then that's even better.
Awesome.
But they're cool. They're cool. Like the one I worked on in the first wave was Monstar, and he's huge. It's huge. Like I looking through the all, like digging up like old style guide images and character lineups. My impression of his size was always the based on the Kenner lineup. But when you really look at how big he is on the cartoon, and particularly in those character lineups in the style guide, he is a massive, massive character. So he's, I never put him next to the ogre, but he might, he's proportionally different, but I think he's in the same ballpark as the ogre, at least height wise.
Their press release today said he was an 11-inch supersized figure.
That might be to the top of the spike.
Okay, yeah, that'll add that extra.
I don't know for sure, because they might have looked at it and looked at the reference and decided to go bigger. But I know our prototype probably was around 11 inches, like to the top of the spike. But big, big figure.
Yeah, and he's a figure, again, not a property that I have nostalgia for, but I like cool toys. And when I saw both Monstar and Buzzsaw, I was like, those are cool characters. Like I want to have those on a toy shelf.
Yeah, there's some good villains in there. That's for sure. That's what I always wanted, back in the day. Like the good guys are cool too, with the chrome and all that. But the bad guys were they were cool. They were very unique looking characters.
With all this nostalgia for old toy lines coming back, I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this. Do you know the number one toy line I would love to see get a reboot?
I am very curious to hear this.
Inhumanoids.
That's a good one.
Oh,
that was during that same period where I wasn't buying toys, but I would still go with my brother into the toy aisle, and I remember thinking those things were super cool.
So it's funny because when I remember being a kid, and there was a big green plant monster called Tendril, because they had the big giant monsters, the Inhumanoids. And I remember wanting it. My mom wouldn't get it for me, and it always just needled at me. So when I became a toy collector, that was one of the first things that I wanted to add to my collection. And it took me a good 4 years to get it, not because it was expensive, because it was obscure. Like, I could go to toy shows and find all of these expensive Star Wars and Spawn figures and everything. But in Humanoids, at that point, I just couldn't find it. Like, when I finally got it, I think it was like $20, was not an expensive figure, but it took me so long. And I look at that line and the character designs, and they're just monsters, big human characters in mech suits. And I'm like, oh, how is no one snatched up in Humanoids? That's one I
don't see those at the toy shows. Like, I don't remember the last time I've seen one of those.
No, occasionally, if I see one, you'll see like one of the tree monsters or whatever, and it's usually just in a random assortment with other figures from that era, like Silverhawks and Mass Universe or something, and there'll just be one of these random ones there. You don't generally see the three big Inhumanoids.
Well, that's for me, I like growing like as a kid. At one point, like the Grail item was a Shogun Warrior.
Oh, yeah.
And then, one of my biggest, Christmas morning gifts was the Kenner Alien. Yeah. And so, like, just as a kid, like, if you've got a figure that's almost as tall as you, like these jumbo toys, they're just so cool. And then that was early, or not late 70s when that stuff was coming out. And so by the time Inhumanoids came around, like, you hadn't seen a big bulky figure like that in a long time, from what I can remember. So like that's what that stuff brought me back to, because not only were they were tall, but they were just like that mass and
Yeah.
the bright color. Yeah, that's a cool one.
Yeah, he's right behind me.
Oh, nice.
I have him on the floor back there. He doesn't fit anywhere else because he's so big and top heavy. So before we call it a night, any other questions that you want to ask to Eric while you have him on? And again, Eric, thank you very much for joining us for episode 50 here.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been watching you for a while now doing these. Yeah. So like I always think it looks fun. So
well, hopefully it was fun. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself.
No, it's certainly not an interview I've done before. It lives up to the name. It's more of a conversation. So
yeah, and that's well, and it's funny because I will say that is, I've had the chance to, talk to you off the record, many times and just chat. I mean, we did at Toycon a couple weeks ago. I had, as you know, my son with me, and he was over the moon when you said, hey, do you want to go do a working lunch? And we just had lunch and just sat there, and he got to sit in and just be a fly on the wall and just hear us talk about everything. And I mean, a lot of what we talked about was Star Wars Clone Wars and how it made no sense that droids were being programmed to be silly, but that kind of conversation, just sitting there and sharing just our love of all this type of geek culture type stuff. That's always what I enjoy talking about. So that's what I wanted tonight to be. I wanted to ask you some legit questions, get some information to the audience, but I also wanted to have a conversation here.
No, it's awesome. Because that's why there's so many times. I mean, it's at least better now than it used to be. Like back when we were, always doing interviews about Masters of the Universe or DC or whatever. I mean, there was nothing we could answer. But, like sometimes we can't answer stuff just because the plans aren't that far ahead. And other times, we'd like to, maintain some, secrecy. I hate secrecies, like sounds such a bad word, but like we keep some things behind the curtain. Yeah. So there's the excitement of the reveal because it's cool to get the little bits along the way and little reveals along the way, but there's also something about that in your face, like information overload too.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like those reveal specials at G-Con where it's just nonstop reveal. That's impressive. Absolutely. Curtis is saying he would love a virtual aspect to Mythic Weekend. Yeah, there will be a virtual aspect. The idea is that on Saturday, which is a more relaxed day at Legion's Con, what we're going to do is we're going to do some interviews with some of the attendees. Obviously G-Con on the Friday, which is, the start of Mythic Weekend. That's totally virtual for everybody. And then on Sunday, when we do the panel discussions, we're going to broadcast those. So the full schedule for, Legion's Con and for Mythic Weekend is still pending, but we are cognizant of the fact that not everyone can come to New Jersey, and we're going to see what we can do for those people who want to tune in from home. Let's see. Is it possible for a Mythic Cosmic crossover? I mean, it's probably too soon in the line to say whether you're going to cross those over, but it's a question.
I'd say rather than answering that directly, I think it's more important just to say that, like, it's, the Cosmic is not going to be Mythic orcs and dwarves wearing space armor. Like it's if there's any connection to be had, it's in a much less direct way than that. So it would certainly a possibility in the future, but I would want to do it in a way that it's unexpected and a little more clever and meaningful to both of the stories. Like there have to be a good reason for it too.
Good. This is actually a cool question. Will we ever see a fan vote similar to the one for the Blood Armor in Ravina again? Create a character type vote. So those were influenced by that fantastic exclusive, which is, Seventh Kingdom, Gothtropolis, something that was a big part of those early lines for the studio. You brought that into both of the Kickstarters to help create both of those characters. Have you thought about anything like that again for the future?
It's it's the type of thing that we love doing. It's part of really our kind of company history at this point. And it is that ultimate fan interaction. It's a lot of work to do it, but I would think that I would say with certainty we will do it again. I would like to do it in a way where maybe it's something a little different than the past couple times. I think now with the website that we have and with you at the helm, I think there's a lot more opportunities to get get a little more intimate with the interaction and open those possibilities up a little bit more than the last one. The original Fantastic exclusive had a certain process. Then the two that we did during the campaigns, it was a very, overall concept, this kind of similar, the same, but the process itself was different, and that you're picking specific parts and getting an end result. So I think it would be fun to look at what we've done in the past, and again try to do something a little different, and I don't know, a little more in line with just the way our relationship is with the community.
Yeah.
Now as opposed to before. I actually have some ideas, that I think would be pretty cool. It's just, again, it's a matter of there's so many things going on.
Sure.
How to fit it in.
Understood. And speaking of fitting it in, we've kept you a little bit longer than I promised. It's 9:15 now, so there's a lot of great questions coming in, but understanding we only have so much time. I'm going to let Eric go for the night. I'm going to thank him for joining us this evening. Eric, we're going to have you back because we didn't get to all the questions, so that's going to be my way to get you back on another episode. Okay?
Yeah, well, maybe next time I could just come on for a straight Q&A episode and do some rapid fire question and answers. There's definitely a lot of good ones on there.
I know. Is there anything you see that you really want to answer right now? Feel free.
Let's see. Let's start at the top of what's on my screen here. Let's see.
They're gonna come.
I know. Yeah. Now it's gonna start moving. I can't keep up. Is it difficult to find a manufacturer for the figure? It can be. Luckily, we've been working with the same people for quite a while. Let's see. What license would I like to work on? It's a tough one. Maybe this is CB's answer, but I wouldn't mind another crack at the Fantastic Four. Cosmic Legions like Spawn Overkill. That might be a little too close to home. Something like that.
You've done Overkill before, right?
Yeah. This is an interesting one. How hectic is it? I saw another one kind of like this.
Yeah.
Juggling in-house lines and working on licensed product. It's it can be very difficult. I think as a studio as a whole, that's probably where the bigger difficulty is. For me personally, I pick and choose my projects as far as the license stuff. And so, I generally have a good handle on what my schedule looks like. But it's harder and harder because I have to turn more away because Legions is just, it's become bigger. Color palettes differ from retail lines in Mythic Legions. You have more colors to work with. Mythic. I think with Mythic we have more control over the colors that we use, and definitely with the amount of applications. That's a big one for us. That's a big limitation on a lot of like retail lines.
Sure. So is there anything else here?
Avorgus 2.0. But anything's possible. That one's, I would say it's not on the planning stages right now. Walter, you can have Monstar at some point. I don't have one right now.
Pre-order goes up soon. We can all have one. Awesome.
When am I joining the Cabal? I'm there in spirit. I have no plans on joining Facebook. So if there's a version of the Cabal that doesn't require Facebook, that might be when. When is my credit card going to hurt? Hopefully you've got a little while before that. I don't know. I'm now seeing another one about the Cabal. I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll get a Facebook account just to get on the Cabal. It seems like, from what I hear, it seems like it's the only safe place on Facebook. All I hear about is how toxic it is. But I only hear good things about the Cabal. I mean, we love, the members and just the enthusiasm and everything. So,
and CB is pretty active on there, and I know he keeps you up to speed on, what's going on. And there's also obviously the Cabal is also on Instagram, so you do see a little bit of that as well. It's understanding that the Cabal is not the entire Mythic community, but it is a large part of it. It's, it obviously skews very heavy towards the customizing, but it is a wonderfully supportive community. I mean, just seeing today, yesterday, somebody posted that another Cabal member sent them a free Adamon head that they wanted to use for a custom. I mean, Adamon is a fairly expensive figure these days. But that's the kind of, community that you see in the Cabal. So it is a very nice, safe place to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And Rosedale saying the Cabal is the only reason I'm on Facebook. That is not an uncommon thing. I've heard a lot of people say that. Yeah. Walter, all the praise definitely has to go to Walter and his admins. And by the way, when I say Walter and his admins, I'm an admin, but I don't put myself in that group that needs praise because I don't do a lot of the admin work. It's really all of them doing the work. So they get all the praise. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's tremendous watching Walter at Toycon. He knows everybody that comes by. He's made a meaningful connection with them. I mean, you would think their next door neighbors that have known each other for their entire life, just like he runs a tight ship. He keeps everybody in line, but he also brings an amazing enthusiasm and a lot of heart to the proceedings. And I think, everybody just responds so well to that. I mean, watching the people come up and we're so excited to meet him and stuff. His energy is just infectious. It's awesome.
He's a rock star. People love him, and it's genuine. That's what they're responding to. It's genuine enthusiasm. It's genuine, kind-hearted, wanting to build something that people want to be a part of. And that's how the Cabal started, a safe place, a place that we can all share this. And yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've been mentioning it more and more lately because it's becoming more and more about the way that we operate our business. We've been so lucky to be surrounded by people that are so amazing, not only with their their passion for the line, but their abilities, like Walter, like you, and now it's just becoming so many others that it just, like I feel like our little, like a tight knit family is just growing and growing, and it's just I don't know, it's making us better as a company, and it's making the interaction with fans. It's just a lot of it's hard to put into words, because it's just a lot of it is just like it's a feeling, like when going to Toycon, there was just like an energy there that was so much more palpable than any other of these shows that we went to. Like I said, the Cabal members are there sporting the shirts, and and it's again it's all like this just positive energy, and it's just I mean, granted, there's times where I get pissed off about things that happen in the industry and life or whatever. I mean, everybody's human.
Yeah, sure.
But I with this is toys, and I mean it is for us it's a business, and it's our livelihood and stuff as well. But it is toys, and so that should always be fun. It shouldn't be something that makes you miserable. It shouldn't be something that's stressful. I mean, and it can be. Like I said, I've tried to collect G.I. Joe Classified, but it's just cool that it seems to be the pervasive, kind of mindset, of the people that are into this stuff. And so just being in a group of people like that is really cool. And I don't know. And it's just it's like a family reunion. And you mentioned the working lunch, that we had those 2 days, and just having, like I said, it's like having the family back together, and it's cool. Just, some of it was talking some business, and some of it was talking about, dorky robots from Clone Wars.
Well, I think the way to sum up a lot of what you're saying is we use the word community a lot when we talk about Mythic Legions, the Mythic Legions community. But a community is being a part of something, and that really is what you saw at Toycon. You saw people who were there super excited to meet you guys, but also super excited to meet other members in the community, both people behind the tables and people in front of the tables. They were excited to meet each other. I saw multiple people in line who have interacted, and they've never actually met before, but they met in that line, and they talked and they bonded. That's part of being in that community. And I've said it multiple times. I've never, in all my 20-something years of collecting toys, I've never seen a group that's this close-knit, that wants to genuinely help each other out, that just share information, to share their passion. And with everything you have coming, with Cosmic on the way, with New Mythic, with Mythic Weekend, there's just more upside. It's just going to keep getting better.
It's exciting. I enjoy going into work, every time I go into the office, and there's a lot of work to be done and everything, but there's also a lot of just, enjoyment, just kind of knowing that the line is growing, and that people are continuously excited about it, and seem to be getting more so. So it's nice, it makes it makes it feel like it's worth it.
It is. It absolutely is. And with that, we're going to call it a night. Thank you, everyone. I will be back here next week for episode 51. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. I hope to see you for that conversation. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.